This episode of UK Low Carb Podcast is sponsored by Deliciously Guilt-Free. Enjoy the show.
I am so delighted that I get to welcome back my good friend Pauline Cox back to UK Low Carb. And we now have a weekly series called The Pillars of Health. Each week, Pauline will dispel the misconception that if we eat well, then we're healthy. We'll explore together bad lifestyle habits, the stresses of life, poor sleep, lack of exercise, sedentary lifestyle, poor gut health, and poor liver function, and see how these can cause chronic illness and fatigue. The pillars of health are those key areas that we can take control over to live a happier and healthier life. And if you would like to engage in this conversation as we go through each week, then you may through our Facebook group, UK Low Carb. Now over to Pauline to tell us more. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the second part in my amazing series of my good friend Pauline Cox. Welcome to the show, Pauline.
Hi, Dan.
It's wonderful to have you here. And I think last week was so special that, you really did break down, I think, so clearly and precisely. In fact, I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever been a teacher before? Because you are a very natural teacher. I mean, I know you're a teacher now, what you're doing as you're coaching, but, I think if I just sat you in front of an A-level class, they would just understood that perfectly. So I don't let you answer yet. Have you been a teacher? Sorry?
I've never been a teacher. No, I haven't. But I do love taking quite complex subjects and breaking them down into really easy to understand bite-sized chunks, because I feel that's the way that people can access this information and really use it for their benefit. So it is something I really enjoy doing.
And you know what? There's no greater gift actually that you can give to somebody than them understanding themselves, and that could be in so many different ways. But when it comes to their physiology and how their body works, I think that is a great gift. So, so let's carry on with that story. So we've talked about the fuel type that we have, and we did sort of finish last week talking about ketones and glycogen and what's going inside the mitochondria and the cell level. But then you did say that you were going to talk about gut health, and it's something that I really want to know a lot about. And when Graham Phillips came onto the show previously, I know that there was a lot of conversation on the UK Low Carb Facebook group about gut health, because it's probably one of those topics that a lot of us want to know more about as well. So, so where do you start with regards to such a huge topic?
It is a huge topic. You're right. I think what's really interesting to start talking about is acknowledging that there are a huge range of symptoms that we can experience that some people might associate with gut health, and they seem really obvious, like diarrhea or constipation, bloating, which a huge amount of people suffer from bloating, cramps, stomach cramps. But then there are also this huge range of symptoms that we don't associate with gut health, like migraines, anxiety, depression, joint pain, swelling, skin issues. Or the list goes on. There are so many conditions and symptoms that we can link back to the gut. So, there's a very famous saying that the gut is the gateway to great health. And it truly is, actually. And the microbiome is really the gateway to your immune system. So we want to all be hugely fascinated by our microbiome, our gut health, because it has the capacity to transform not just our health, but our experience of day-to-day living.
Wow. Well, I looked up a little fact, because I remember hearing once that if we ever met life from outside our own planet and it ever came to see us, the idea that it would just meet us as a human being and you as an individual and me as an individual, in actual fact, we are like a zoo, a menagerie of bacteria. Yes. And I've just looked at the fact to see how many bacteria there are. Now, according to this website here, which is nih.gov, it's got a gov in it, so it must be fine. It reckons apparently there are 10 to 1 microorganisms to cells. So for every one human cell, there are 10 microorganisms. So in actual fact, we are this huge city of life that's all functioning, and yet we forget that, don't we? We think of, well, I'm just me, and I put whatever I put in my face, and it will just make me have a healthy body, and I don't think about how does it feed all these microorganisms that are in us that we have a symbiotic relationship with. And when you think in that way, you think, whoa, that's quite a different perspective to have suddenly.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, Dan, when you said a symbiotic relationship, because we should live in harmony with this wonderful range of bacteria, fungi, and yeast that live on us and within us. You know, we have microbiomes and this microclimate of bacteria in various areas of the body. And we literally are the puppet and they are the puppet master. You know, they exert a great deal of will over our food choices, how we feel. They have a huge influence on our experience of day-to-day life. And so we want to get very curious about this life we host within us and how we can support it. And also, what are some of the things that we're doing that are damaging this amazing environment and causing this huge increase in chronic illness, and how it's directly related to this disruption in our microbiome.
Okay, so let's do the journey of a lamb chop. Okay, so that's one of my favorite foods. So that's what I'm going to eat, a lamb chop. And by the way, I don't know if you're the same as me, but when I was growing up, I used to eat the fat off the chop and then feel guilty because I'd be told it's bad for me and I shouldn't eat that part. That's the worst bit. In fact, somebody in my extended family said fat is toxic for your body and it will kill you. So I was like, oh, okay. So I was really worried about eating it. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted by lamb chops.
As they were eating a pasty.
Yeah, exactly. As they're eating their healthy bowl of fibrous cereal with sugar. So let's talk about the lamb chop, and let's talk about the how does that lamb chop go through the gut, the process? If you don't mind breaking that down for me.
Yeah, no, it's a great
and then I think that's a good way to coming to the microbiome, right?
Absolutely. So, we have this wonderful system. It's an enclosed and a protected enclosed system that works incredibly well when it works. So we take our lamb chop, into the mouth it goes. We have
Pavlov's dog here. I am actually salivating. This is embarrassing. Yeah, okay. There's no bells needed, is there? Just say lamb chop.
Time to break the fast.
I'm going to go. You just carry on talking. I'm going to go eat. See you later. Sorry, Pauline.
So we're dunking the lamb chop into our avocado mayonnaise and chowing down on it. So first of all, we have
a bit of chili, a bit of lime.
Anyway, wonderful. We have all of this bacteria in our mouth also, which is really key because the bacteria in our mouth affects the bacteria in our gut. So oral health is incredibly important, but that's a topic in itself, really. So we always want to ensure that we have great oral health. By the way, don't use traditional mouthwashes. They destroy your oral microbiome or the bacteria in your mouth.
You're so right. So I was using mouthwash around the time I got married. I thought I'd be sophisticated to try and impress Besma because I thought, mouthwash is what you do when you're an adult now. I'm in my 30s, whatever. So I started using mouthwash. Then the dentist said, your teeth are getting stained. Are you using mouthwash? And I said, yeah. She said, don't do it. It's really stains your teeth. And I was like, really? She said, it's terrible for your mouth. Never use mouthwash. I was like, oh, I didn't realize I got taken in by the advertisers.
Good dentist. Yeah. In fact, I'm pretty sure, and I don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure Listerine started off as a floor wash.
It did indeed, yeah. And it's named after Joseph Lister, the surgeon who invented antiseptic surgery. So it was actually an antiseptic. Wasn't meant for the mouth at all. It was meant for cleaning floors.
They just rebranded it for mouthwash. So we really want to be concerned about the bacteria within our mouth that we're cleaning, but cleaning appropriately. And then chewing. So slow down and chew your food. So you're really breaking it down. We swallow, it goes down this nice muscular tube and takes us to the stomach, which is a pretty impressive organ. It's this large balloon-shaped muscular sac that has a mucosal membrane, a nice thick mucous membrane to house this very, very acidic environment. Now, this acidic environment should be between pH about 1 and 3. And if you cast your mind back to school, that's really, really acidic on the sort of scale of acidity where 0, 7, and 14 is alkaline. And it's essentially acidic enough to dissolve a razor blade. Not that we're ever going to swallow a razor blade.
Wow, that's strong.
How acidic it is. It's incredibly acidic. Now, we need that acidity. There are reasons we have this acidic environment. It's firstly to kill off any invading bacteria. It's a really great line of defense for anything coming into the body. I mean, if you think about it, we're constantly breathing. Well, we should be nasally breathing, but when we talk and inhale through our mouth, bacteria is coming directly into our lungs, but also down into our stomach. We're swallowing foods that have toxins and pathogens. So this acidic environment is able to kill off anything that could potentially invade our gastrointestinal tract and cause problems. Secondly, we need this acidity to break down that lamb chop. So a lamb chop or any complex protein is really quite a solid food source. Even though we've chewed it up, we want to break it down into its constituent amino acids.
Yeah.
And these amino acids are really important for building our muscle, skin, hair, bones, nails, neurotransmitters. We need these amino acids for pretty much everything in the body. So breaking that protein down requires a very acidic environment. And then, as we referred to in the last episode, Dan, we need a very acidic environment in order to access key nutrients like iron and magnesium and zinc. And if we're lacking in acidity, our body can't absorb these key nutrients, these key minerals. And then we start to get these secondary symptoms like anemia, or, the magnesium has a huge range, over 300 enzymatic activities in the body. So that you start to get these very quirky symptoms like anemia or poor skin healing, brittle nails, thinning hair. And it's all related to the fact that your body isn't able to access the amino acids it needs or the nutrients it needs because your gut acidity has changed.
So it's just passing through you without you being able to draw what you need from it.
Yeah, and if you have any kind of intestinal permeability or hyperpermeability, i.e. leaky gut, then those undigested food particles can actually enter into your bloodstream and trigger a reaction in your immune system. So it can lead to all sorts of things like food sensitivity.
Oh, that's what leaky gut is. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So hang on. I just want to just, okay, I'm going to take on the vegan community here slightly. So brace yourself, everyone. Would you say evolutionary wise, do we have the kind of the stomach we'll start with? We don't talk about the rest of the microbiome, but do we seem to have the stomach of some of a species that has evolved to eat meat then? Or, is this comparable to ruminant animals, or is it comparable more to, lions and tigers and things?
Yeah.
I mean, predators?
It's a really great question because, there are tribes of individuals who live incredibly long and healthy lives who are vegetarian. There are those tribes who live on whale blubber and then, wild boar. I think we're very adaptive as a species, Dan, and we adapt to our environment, and we have the capacity to use meat for fuel as well as plant-based and eggs and dairy. So I think it's actually more our body's ability to adapt to a diet that is congruent still with our physiology that makes us such an incredible species. So, you can have a perfectly healthy vegetarian diet. I would say that vegan is a little bit more challenging unless you're consciously ensuring you're getting some of those other nutrients that you won't get primarily from a vegan diet. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question, are we compatible with meat eating? Yes, we are. Are we also compatible with plant-based eating? Yes, we are, because that plant-based, the cellulose cell wall of plants needs a very acidic environment to access, for example, the iron in spinach. It's much easier for us to absorb the iron in meat than it is to absorb the iron in spinach by about 20-25% more bioavailable in meat. So you need a very acidic stomach if you're vegan or vegetarian, and that's your primary source of iron, i.e. spinach and kale and these green plants. So we are very well set up. Our digestive system's kind of covered all bases, as we are with the dual fuel burning situation. It's sort of covered all bases to make sure we can absorb and digest meats well, and the same with plant-based food.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. Okay, then. So let's carry on the journey then through my gut. So I'm digesting nicely now this lamb chop. So let's go to kind of from the stomach. Where are we going next and what's happening?
Sure. So we have this nice, let's assume we have great stomach acidity, that we, just on a point there, the things that affect our stomach acidity, things like stress, overly processed food, certain medications like the contraceptive pill or proton pump inhibitors, over-the-counter antacids, there are these key things that can affect our stress. And as we age as well, we tend to have less acidity in our stomach. But we're going to take a very healthy individual and they have great stomach acidity. So this food's been broken down. We have this soupy substance called chyme, and that's now going to enter into via the duodenum and into the small intestine. And in theory, this is all going really nice and well. We're coming across a whole range of our gut microbes. Now, this is where the gut microbes have a field day. We're feeding our gut microbiome at this stage, or we could be damaging it. And it's what we're eating, as well as those other lifestyle factors, that has a really big impact on this community of bacteria within our gastrointestinal tract. And the foods that we eat can either be supporting and feeding them, or we can be introducing bacteria through our diet, like fermented foods and probiotics, to help colonize and then support the colonies of bacteria that we're seeing and sort of cultivating in those areas.
Wow. So my mum is a midwife, or retired midwife now. And I remember her when we first had my daughter, who's now 6 in a couple of weeks. Besma was breastfeeding her. And my mum said, did you know that I think it's about 80% of the breast milk can't be digested by a human being? And so they used to look into this, saying, like, what is this? Why then has nature made it that we've got this 80% of this breast milk that is not actually good for the human being at all? They actually learned it was completely feeding their microbiome of the baby. And so actually which is incredible. When you think that's mind blowing. That actually we've evolved to feed the microbiome, because we know that is an essential part of us, although it's actually another life species, which is incredible to think of. And so it's actually feeding the microbiome to make that healthier, which directly relates to immune system, to our health generally. Everything else comes from the fact we're feeding the microbiome, which was mind-blowing to me, which, it's incredible when you think that.
Yes, and I think what we need to start recognizing is that the microbiome is a sort of a go-between. So when the microbiome comes across, a fibrous food, it will use that to produce something else. So it breaks down food and it will produce like short chain fatty acids, for example. And these short chain fatty acids feed the colonocytes, so the cells that line the colon. And it will take other foods that we eat, and they produce bioactive compounds that directly communicate and interact with various systems in our body. So they're taking our food and making really potent products and bioactive compounds that have a huge impact on our health of certain specific tissues and systems. And then generally, a lot of people understand there's this gut-brain connection and communication, and it's still not hugely understood. I mean, there's vast amounts of research going on, but the capacity that the gut has and the influence the gut has on our health and our mental health as well is, I think we're just literally scratching the surface when it comes to understanding the link that the gut has with all systems of the body.
Amazing. So in that case, if I'm trying to feed my gut, to make sure it's healthy, and you said fermented foods are a good thing. Fermented food go back thousands of years, don't they? Humans have been eating this for a long, long time, fermented foods. So is that basically introducing new bacteria to my gut, which might be good in its own sense? Or is it also the fact that because it's fermented, bacteria would kind of like to eat that food?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one thing to note is if the gut, if you kind of think of the gut as like a nice free-flowing river and not a stagnant pond that has just bacteria growing in it, because sometimes you can have a over-diversified, over-populated gut microbiome, i.e. something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So there's just too much bacteria going on, and we're eating the wrong foods, and bad bacteria and yeasts are growing, and then you start to get all sorts of problems, from skin problems to fungal infections. And we want to make sure we're getting the right bacteria fed. And there are certain strategies that we can use to try and kill off the bad bacteria and then repopulate and cultivate the good bacteria. Okay. So fermented foods is a fantastic way of helping to get the good bacteria, the good guys in there, and then to encourage its growth through lifestyle and other foods we're eating. Now, sauerkraut's particularly nice because sauerkraut has what's called probiotics, which are the bacteria, and prebiotics, which is the food the bacteria like to live on. So cabbage serves as the food that the bacteria will eat, And it's a really beautiful, and also sauerkraut has a very high level of lactic acid, and lactic acid starts to help reacidify your stomach. So you're getting acid for your stomach, you're getting the prebiotics, which is the food for the bacteria, and you're introducing the probiotics, which is the actual bacteria itself. So you get this amazing 3 tick, tick, tick when you take something like sauerkraut. And, if you have a little bit of daily fermented food, or something fermented every day, like kvass or kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir. There are so many different fermented products on the market now that are very healthy. And just make sure that when you're buying your sauerkraut, you don't get it from the supermarket shelf. It should always be found in the fridge, because there are sauerkrauts you can find in the supermarket that are pasteurized. So essentially you're just eating cabbage. There's no bacteria in there.
Oh, because they've all been wiped out then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So just talking on that point about food then. So, the way that we treat our field system in this country and around the Western world, we have pesticides wiping out all the insects to keep the crops nice and healthy. Is it a bit sort of comparable to that with the preservatives that are in some foods on our microbiome? So when we're eating them, effectively we've got a massive amount of chemicals going through our guts, and of course that is killing off the microbiome. Is that how it works?
It is, but it's not just that, Dan. It actually goes a lot deeper than that, in that the soils that are heavily treated, we need this rich soil full of bacteria that has an impact on the plant itself, and then the bacteria on the plant. So, there's a lot of studies that will say organic vegetables are comparable to non-organic. You get the exact same amount of fiber in one versus the other, or the same amount of protein in one product versus the other. When you look at the micronutrient levels, when you look at the bacterial profile, they are very different. So we need healthy soil. We are just an extension of the external environment. And by destroying the bacteria within the soil and really having that negative impact on our agricultural system, it has a very negative impact on our internal environment as well as our nutrient absorption of these very devoid foods, the lack of vitamin C, or the comparable levels of vitamin C and iodine and selenium, and these nutrients that we would have found historically in high levels in plants and soils are now just being depleted, and it is having an impact on our nutrient density and our gut environment.
You know what? I can visually see that in another way, and I completely agree with you there. I feel like as a human species, we're like on the top of this big tree of life, and we're at the top branch looking at the sky going, oh my goodness, aren't we amazing? Aren't we part of the heavens? And actually forgetting we're actually connected to the earth. And I feel like we're almost like cutting the branch behind us sometimes, thinking we can do whatever we want with our environment. We can do whatever we want with our bodies and our health and our nutrition. And we're somehow above all of that now. We don't have to worry about it, but actually we are directly related to it. And if we don't get our relationship correct with ourselves and the way we eat, but also with how we farm and the way we treat our planet, I think it all goes hand in hand. I think there's a whole thing about philosophy about how to live a better life in the planet you're actually evolved to be in, and to give back to it, not just to keep taking from it. And I think we've got to learn that as a species, how, the life of my gut is linked to the life in the fields, and the life, it's all connected, isn't it? It's all evolved together for that very reason, hasn't it?
We've seemed to have made bacteria our enemy, and it has an impact on us. So we sanitize our environment extensively. We live in a very restricted environment. We work in boxes with artificial light, and we tend to keep our windows closed. There are some simple things, we can do to just improve our gut health, believe it or not, but improve our microbiome by just breathing fresh air, going for a walk, lying on the grass, going swimming in the lake. There are beneficial bacteria and viruses in the water, in the air around you. Even having a pet in the house, individuals with pets at home have a greater diversity in their microbiome than those who don't. People who get out walking every day, gardeners, people who spend time, gardening and planting their own foods. It's this exposure to microbes and bacteria within the air, within the soil, within the grass, within the waters, outside, just having the windows open so you're getting fresh air. These are all very, very simple ways of ensuring and going for a walk, going for a daily walk. Not only is the act of the exercise having an impact on your gut health, your gut microbiome, but the actual air that you're breathing and the wind, you're taking in your environment when you interact with your environment.
And of course, things like vitamin D, I know it's a different topic, but all those things will be healthier if you just got sunlight compared to having to take tablets. Now, I appreciate some people would have to take tablets for other reasons, but just be part of your environment is part of health, isn't it? It's how humans have been for millions of years.
Yeah.
But let's take that further then. So I think this is lovely. So now we're gonna kind of come to the part where you kind of give your tips and your advice really. So people listening now, somebody who this is for me actually more than anyone else. I want to know this too. What can I do to improve and give myself the best shot at having a healthy microbiome?
Well, there are some lifestyle tips as well as nutritional. I think we'll start with nutritional, and we want to really ensure we're not adding in foods and items into our gut that are damaging our microbiome. Okay. Now, sometimes antibiotics are necessary, but they do wipe out your microbiome. So, it might be addressing certain medications that are having an impact, NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, proton pump inhibitors, because again, as you change your stomach acidity, it's going to change the bacterial profile. It allow things like C. difficile infections, which is one of the most common gut infections, to proliferate. Right. So we really want to make sure that if we're taking medication, and I'm not suggesting that we don't, this is for informational purposes only, it's not medical advice. It's important to recognize, well, why am I taking that proton pump inhibitor or antacid? Is my diet driving it? Am I lacking stomach acidity? So I'm getting this heartburn and it's creeping up. So looking at what you're currently eating, processed foods. I mean, processed foods are very damaging to our gut health, the microbiome, as well as perpetuating cravings, because it interacts with the neurons that go from your stomach straight up to your brain. And these neurons that are there to tell the brain, I'm satiated, I've had enough, I don't need any more, become damaged by emulsifiers and these processed compounds found within processed foods. So that trigger's now gone. So you become this overeater, this compulsive eater, craving more of the foods that are just really damaging the insides and our health. So removing processed foods, removing inflammatory foods, removing certain things that trigger food sensitivities or certainly trigger leaky gut. And for me, that would be gluten. That might not be for everyone. However, gluten has an impact on the intestinal lining that upsets the tight junctions within that very, very delicate gut lining that allows foods to start to pass through into the bloodstream, and it can cause all sorts of problems, systemic inflammation, autoimmune conditions. So you might want to look at removing gluten if that is appropriate for you. It certainly would be on my recommendations. Gluten, processed foods, and the reducing the toxins that you're taking in your diet, so additives, preservatives, and then potentially addressing your medications as well. Then we want to be adding in the foods that are feeding your microbiome. Your microbiome loves fiber-rich foods. It loves colorful foods. So polyphenols are amazing for helping the good gut bacteria to flourish. And there are certain key bacteria that have been identified as being really important for certain jobs, like helping to heal the intestinal lining by producing like a mucus lining. And when that bacteria is absent, it can really perpetuate leaky gut. Certain bacteria are really important for breaking down fats and for processing those fats. And when those bacteria are absent, we become more of an obese microbiome, and the profile of an individual, the microbiome of an individual who is overweight versus someone who's slim, healthily slim and overweight due to dietary choices. Their microbiomes are very different. And there's been some incredibly interesting research where you take the microbiome of an overweight mouse and you transplant it into that of a slim mouse, change nothing else. You don't change the diet. And within days, the slim mouse has gained significant amounts of weight.
I've heard this. Now, isn't there the story of the lady who had to have, I really apologize, listeners, I'm not I'm obviously a layperson in this area, but she had a poo ectomy, I guess. I don't know what you call it, a poo transfer for some reason, she had to have some of the microbiome taken from her daughter and given to her because of a bad infection she had. Her daughter was obese. The mother was very, very thin. After this transfer of the microbiome, the mother put on weight very rapidly, very quickly, without changing anything in her diet, because why would she? And it was very much linked to the microbiome that she had from her daughter, which, wow, mind-blowing.
Yeah, and that, I think, is why, if people start to understand that, obsessively running and going to the gym 4 times a day to try and change your body composition is, that's one option. However, you must address your gut issues, because we need a healthy, flourishing gut microbiome to process, digest, break down fats. And, you have these obesogenic gut profiles, and the absence of certain bacteria really indicates the profile of someone who is having weight issues or resistant weight issues versus that of a slim individual. And diversity, as we mentioned earlier, is very, very important for all aspects of health, and low diversity has been associated with really poor health outcomes. So we really want to be constantly looking at how we promote and improve healthy gut bacterial diversity. And that does come through eating a diet, a really varied diet as well. And this is slightly where I find I have a bit of a bugbear around people who label keto as just high fat and, just bacon and lard and just fatty foods. We really
don't
want
come
to
around
make
here
sure
this afternoon, then you won't be impressed with my lunch. Carry on.
But it is, Dan, it's so important that you get those plant-based fibrous foods and colorful food. The polyphenols in brightly colored peppers and red tomatoes and your brightly colored carrots and things. I know there are individuals out there who might jump on and say, well, peppers aren't keto. I don't care if they're labeled keto or not. Peppers are brightly colored, and they for sure feature on my plate of food, because their benefits to feeding our good gut bacteria are incredible. And, these brightly colored vegetables will encourage particularly these bacteria that help with breaking down fats and healing the gut microbiome. Akkermansia is that one particular bacteria that will help with the permeability of the gut lining, and it's also very important for breaking down and processing fat.
Okay, so I know it's maybe a hard question to answer. How long do you think it would take? Say, I'm going to talk about me, not anyone else. If I've got, like, for instance, a not healthy gut bacteria, how long are we talking for recovery, do you think, for a gut to kind of, well, not get to full health, but certainly be a lot better off than it is at the moment? Are we talking about a slow recovery or a quick recovery? Is it dependent on the lifespan of the bacteria themselves?
It's a good question. So if you're looking at leaky gut can take, it depends on the individual. If you were to go on a gluten-free diet for 60 days, 0 gluten, let's say, and then you noted all of these inflammatory conditions, your joints are improving and you're feeling great and your brain fog's cleared and clarity of thoughts back. That's a really nice test for a gluten intolerance. Now, that could indicate, if things start to really improve, that could indicate that your gut lining is really healing and improving. And we'll talk about the bacteria in a second. And that lining, that gut lining, for some people can take 30, 40, 50, 60 days. For some, it can take up to 12 months. And that's why it's really important when you're changing your diet, if you're going gluten-free, don't do it for 2 months and go, oh, it didn't work for me. My joints still hurt, or I still feel rubbish. I'm off. Really commit to making these changes as part of a lifestyle, not as some people disparagingly say, oh, it's faddy. No, see it as a way of really starting to heal your internal environment and give it time. Particularly if you've had really inflammatory conditions like severe skin issues or severe joint problems, give it that time. Now, when it comes to the microbiome, the bacteria, let's say we had some sauerkraut right now. I'm eating my sauerkraut. In about 20 days, that bacteria will essentially be dead, there and thereabouts. So we're wanting to replenish and constantly add bacteria and support our gut bacteria, because it has quite a short turnaround.
Right.
You're not eating sauerkraut at the beginning of the month. You're like, tick, I'm done with my probiotics now.
Seeded myself now for the year. That's me done.
Yeah, exactly. It's in, it's done. It's so much better to have this as a daily habit where you're really rotating your fermented foods as well. So you might have sauerkraut with some garlic in it, or some turmeric, some beetroot sauerkraut, the seaweed sauerkraut. There are so many varieties, and I tend to have 3 or 4 varieties in my fridge, and then I'll just rotate it depending on what I'm having for lunch that day. I might mix it with some mayonnaise. If you're not wild about sauerkraut, mix it with a bit of avocado mayonnaise and make sort of like a fermented slaw. There are lots of ways that you can use sauerkraut to just see it as a way of building up and recolonizing this amazing environment within your gut.
Great. And just the last thing I was going to ask then on that is, it's not all nutrition, is it? As you said, it's environment, but also, and I know we're going to talk about this because this is probably, for me, one of the biggest pillars that I've got to put upright again, because it's falling down all the time, and that's sleep and stress. I mean, is it right to say that has a huge impact on the gut health as well?
Massive. Stress particularly. Well, actually saying that sleep as well, but stress.
Yeah.
Stress really affects our gut acidity. So we lose stomach acidity when we become chronically stressed. It then has an impact on our gut microbiome. We tend as well to make poor food choices when we're chronically stressed. So we crave carbs. We tend to eat more sugar. Yeah. We have this direct link from the gut to the brain via the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve tells the brain that we're eating sugar, and it lights our brain up like a Christmas tree, releasing dopamine, this hugely rewarding neurotransmitter. So when we're feeling a bit tired through lack of sleep, or we're highly stressed, then we want something to pep us up, and sugar tends to be up there on the list of priorities for a lot of people. So that really has a negative impact on our gut, and it feeds the bad bacteria. So they start to really thrive, and it outcrowds the good gut bacteria. So the good and bad gut bacteria will love different foods or prebiotics. The good gut bacteria love fiber and polyphenols from brightly colored vegetables. The bad bacteria love sugar and carbs and gluten and all the things, processed foods. And they also dislike intermittent fasting. So when you're fasting, you're essentially killing off your bad bacteria as well.
I didn't know that.
So it's giving your gut a really good reset.
Amazing. I didn't know that. That's incredible. Well, there you go, everyone. That's, I think we've covered so much there. It's incredible. And I just think in 10 years' time, we'll do another episode and we'll realize there's like loads of new stuff that's being discovered all the time. It's just one of those real cutting edge areas, isn't it, Pauline? Thank you so much for today. That's been really insightful. And if anyone wants to be part of the conversation we're having around these topics, then you can go to the UK Low Carb Facebook group where Pauline is there and be part of the conversation. But also, I was going to say, as we're going through these episodes, what will happen is there'll be eventually a live session we'll do at the end, where then you can have, ask Pauline a question if you like. So, make some notes, note down things, write them in the group, maybe be part of the conversation to then also work towards the final Ask Me Anything series with Pauline, which is a bit terrifying. I know, Pauline, what's anyone going to ask? But they're all lovely people, so I'm sure it'll be a great question. I just want to say as well, before I say goodbye to you today, if you want to read more about this is a really good book that I recommend called Primal Living in the Modern World by Pauline Cox. So if you want to check that out, you can. Where's the best place to get this book from, Pauline?
You can get it on our website, which is Sow and Arrow, www.sowandarrow, so like bow and arrow with an S. And also you can follow us on Instagram, where we're constantly putting up links and things to various items and products we have going. So either the Sow and Arrow website or Sow and Arrow Instagram.
Brilliant. So there you go. So there's the book behind me, so you can see that. So check that out. Pauline, thank you so much for today. I've learned a lot and my mind is just like bursting with ideas now. So thank you for your time.
I can't wait to get stuck into your sauerkraut. Can you, Dan?
Well, the lamb chop as well. That's coming first, I'm afraid. That's my priority. Well, awesome. Have a great week, okay?
Thank you. And you too.
Bye, Dan.
Bye, Dan.